welcome to Clay to Canopy, the show where I attempt to make just about everything from the ground up. Today I'm going to be making a 3-course plant-based autumn-inspired meal. So come on, let's do this. Going to be very pumpkin forward, and I'm using a couple different types of pumpkins as my dishes for this meal. When you walk into a grocery store and you see all these different pumpkins, for the most part, unless it says decorative only, they're edible. Gardeners are here. The noise is throwing me off as usual. Seriously, aren't leaf blowers illegal now? The pumpkins you find in the produce section at the grocery store are completely edible. Who knew, right? They only place it next to, the rest of the produce, the apples and whatever else is edible. But for the most part, if you pick up a pumpkin in the produce section at the grocery store and it does not say for decorative use only, it is most likely completely edible. So I have here 2 different sized Casper pumpkins, and then I have some small Jack Littles. The large Casper pumpkin is going to serve as my dish for an autumn-inspired cranberry walnut kale salad. The smaller 2 white Casper pumpkins are going to become my soup bowls, and these 3 Jack Littles are going to become the holder for the main course. I also have a couple of butternuts that I'm going to be using to make the soup. So my oven is preheated to 400 degrees. The first thing I need to do is clean up my pumpkins and get them roasting. So first thing I'm going to prep are my butternut squash. I'm just going to cut them open. I have my potato peeler here, and I just like to take my potato peeler and use them to deal with the outside skin. I could just slice these in half, throw them in the oven and let them roast that way, and then scoop out the fleshy parts. I'm going to cube this and roast it instead. It's going to reduce my cooking time, and then it's also going to allow me to set aside a little bit of the roasted squash to use in my kale salad. Alright, I'm just going to slice them in half. See what we got going on in here. These came out of the garden. They're a miniature butternut type. I think they're a honey nut. I'm going to dice these up, toss them in a bit of olive oil, and sprinkle on some of my nutmeg. You know what? I'm going to run out to the garden. I think I'd like to have some thyme also in the mix. I got a handful of thyme and what I think is oregano. The garden is crazy wild at this point, so it's hard to tell what anything is. I absolutely love it crazy wild that way. I wouldn't change it. Up. I think that was mint. Alright, I'm going to throw in the stalk of celery cut up just to add some flavor to this roasting. It also will add flavor to the soup. Celery, my favorite vegetable. Not. I'm also going to throw in a bit of onion. Not too concerned about the size of it because it's going to get blended up. The only thing I need to do is pick out a bit of that squash for my salad. Alrighty, on goes some of the olive oil. 2, 3. It's about a tablespoon of olive oil-ish. All sprinkled up with some nutmeg. You know what? I'm going to throw on some sage. This is going to go into the oven and roast for about 15 to 20 minutes. I just want to make sure that the butternut is cooked through. Then I'm going to go ahead and separate some of it for my salad, and the rest is going to set aside to cool so I can blend it up. I don't like backtracking, and since I already have the celery and onion out, I'm just going to chop and prep what I need for the main course that I'm going to be making and set them aside, and it's much more time efficient. I'm going to want this a little bit more on the bite size, especially since, celery is my favorite, right? So I like the flavor, I like essence of celery in my food. So I'm going to cut this fairly small. Feeling like I just might throw in a 4th course. think we might need an appetizer, so I'm gonna set aside this. Since I want these pumpkins to be more like serving dishes, I am just gonna carve into them and make a removable lid. So I'm just gonna come in here at the side, and I have my knife at a slight angle with my paring knife. I did wash all of these and went over them with a mushroom brush with a little bit of soapy water, mild dish detergent, just to get any of the dirt off of them, since these were probably loaded onto a truck. This is not one of my homegrown pumpkins, so I am not going to save these seeds. The reason why I purchased some is that the ones we grew here are pretty massive and they are way too big to put onto this table. So I had to go find some that were much more agreeable with the feast table that these are going on. Clearing out some room here so that I have some space to put my salad in. I am going to be cooking these because no one wants to pick up sides of a raw pumpkin. I'm going to be repeating this same exact process with the smaller pumpkins. You know, there's not too much mystery to it. So therapeutic. I doubt you want to sit here for hours watching me pull apart pumpkins. To finish this off, I'm going to drizzle in a little bit of olive oil and nutmeg into the flesh, and then this is going to go into the oven. Now, to cook a pumpkin, you're normally looking at 45 to a half an hour. I do not want a full roast on this because I need it to retain its shape. I'm going to be watching it after a half an hour and making sure that I keep testing it and checking if it's tender, if it's ready. Oh, where's my mapina? Okay, and into the oven we go. You can throw this onto a baking sheet. I'm gonna bake it with the top on it. I got a bit more prepping to do. Chop an apple for the soup, and then I also want to cut up an apple for the savory main. I'm gonna spend some time chopping the rest of the fruits and vegetables for this meal, and since I'm already in it and I've decided to throw in that extra appetizer and change my 3-course to a 4-course, I have a couple extra apples and I think I can throw together a quick crumble so I can make this a 5-course feast. I would like to point out that these are Honeycrisp apples, not Red Delicious apples. I have a total peeve story. I love things Disney, as we all know, and I tried to get into Once Upon a Time, and I was about 10-15 minutes into the show, and she rolls in with a basket of apples and she goes, "I brought you my Honeycrisp apples fresh picked from my yard," and the apples were Red Delicious apples. So I gotta tell you, I couldn't watch the rest of it after that. Shut it off because I couldn't tell the difference between a Red Delicious and a Honeycrisp. I mean, they're two really blaringly obvious different apples. And truthfully, I think that a Red Delicious apple has absolutely no flavor. You know what, I think these need to be a little bit smaller. That's what I get for being too busy yakking about Red Delicious and Honeycrisp apples. I almost bought a Red Delicious so I could hold them up side by side and have this conversation. Then I just couldn't do it because I'm telling you, they don't have any kind of flavor to me. This apple is going to be in the main dish. I'm calling it the main. It's the Jack Be Little pumpkins. I'm going to be using various mushrooms to create what would be a savory meat stuffed thing, but since I don't eat meat, I'm using mushrooms as my substitute, but I'm going to prepare it as if the mushrooms were like a ground meat. If you are a meat eater, you could make this entire recipe completely the same, just sub out my mushrooms for some kind of ground meat. And I'm just sprinkling it with a little bit of lemon juice so that it doesn't brown on me while it's sitting here and I'm prepping the rest of the ingredients. We're gonna set that one aside for that, and I will keep these for the extra cobbler I decided to make. This is going into the blender, so I don't need to really cut it small, and the different sizes will hopefully help me remember what is in each bowl. Apples are done. Next up, I'm gonna dice some carrots. You need that for the main. The very last thing I need to prep are the star of the show. These beautiful, beautiful, beautiful mushrooms. Look at that. This is like amazing. These are the most beautiful things ever. Okay, I am just gonna slice these up and cut them into small pieces. They are gonna cook down. My appetizer is going to be stuffed mushrooms. That was the add-on that I was going to make. So I am also going to be prepping a batch of portobellos for that as well. Before I get to the glorious mushrooms, I realize that these apples are going to be sitting here, the ones that I prepped for the cobbler. So while they're sitting here, I might as well let them start juicing. So I have a tablespoon of the golden Lakanto. And then I also have a teaspoon of cinnamon, a nice generous teaspoon of cinnamon. I'm gonna go ahead and mix these up. I have a mixture of shiitake, portobello, oyster, and that hybrid one that everybody's been using to make scallop mushrooms that look like scallops. It's a hybrid oyster and I forgot what else, hybrid of something else. I think I could live off of mushrooms. Mushrooms and broccoli. I used to have a thing where I'd say, don't bring me flowers, bring me leaves. Don't bring me chocolates, bring me cheese. And I think I'm gonna amend that and say, if you're trying to win this girl over right here, bring me a bouquet of broccoli and a box of exotic mushrooms, or just mushrooms in general. For the appetizer ones, I'm just gonna do some stuffed mushrooms, and for those I want to remove the insides. I've been loving on this recipe. It is like ridiculously easy, and it's something that I've been just making at the beginning of the week where I can just throw them in the oven and then take them for lunch. I'm gonna be throwing these into the food processor, so I just need to get them cut a bit, along with that celery and that onion that I had pre-cut from earlier. The pumpkins are out and I have lowered the temp of my oven to 350. To start off, I'm gonna take that mushroom, the celery, and the onion and pulse it a bit in my food processor. This is a super easy recipe and I have been loving up on this recipe for a couple weeks now. I'm gonna transfer that mix into my bowl. I have 2 tablespoons of this Miyoko's vegan butter, and I've melted 2 tablespoons. That's gonna go in. I have some club crackers. They are multigrain club crackers. As far as I can tell, there are no animal products in this. So normally I make a small batch, so about 6 of these takes about 4 crackers. We'll do 15 crackers just to be sure. Right under the brown one. Okay. I do not throw these in the food processor because I like to have a little bit more of the crumbly texture, more like breadcrumbs. So this is my secret. I do not use breadcrumbs. I use this cracker. I also do add, these are gluten-free breadcrumbs. They're just cornflake crumbs. Also, don't say that they have any kind of animal product in it, so it should be pretty vegan. I don't measure, I'm just gonna eyeball. Let's see, that's about a tablespoon. About 2 tablespoons. And the last thing I have is, I love this brand, Via Life. So this is a Parmesan, a vegan Parmesan. I'm gonna shred some of this. Not my last ingredient. Totally forgot. I need to run inside and grab some Italian seasoning. Looks like that's about an ounce. If you are not making vegan and you want to make these anyway, go ahead and use your regular butter and regular Parmesan cheese. Everything else would be pretty much the same thing. Got my Italian seasoning. Looks like about a teaspoon-ish. I did not add any salt because the crackers have a lot of salt and so do this cheese. You can adjust that for yourself. I would recommend tasting it first if that's the case. I have now made these probably 5th or 6th batch in the past like 2 weeks or so. I got this one pretty down to my likings. All right, that's it. You're just gonna come in and fill up your mushrooms. I start off small because I don't know how much of this. These are a lot larger mushrooms than I've been using lately. These are gonna go onto a cookie sheet and I am gonna bake these for about 20, maybe 22 minutes because these are a little bit larger than the ones that I have been making these past couple of weeks. While these are doing their thing, so I'm gonna get moving on to the main dish. I'm gonna start off by throwing some olive oil in my pan. I have my pan here, but it's been heating. What is that? It's like half a tablespoon, 1 tablespoon. In goes my onion. Give that a minute. And I'm not measuring my salt. I just have a little bowl here of salt that as I add a vegetable, I add a bit of salt so that it'll help sweat that vegetable. Waiting for it to get a little translucent before I throw in my celery. All right, in goes the celery. If you are not cooking with oil and you are cooking with broths only, go ahead and use your broth to get you going. There's something about a little bit of that oil with the sizzling smell of that onion. I don't know. I think that it's hard for me to gauge the broth, especially when I'm cooking with mushroom, because mushrooms, when they go in, they kind of make their own broth. I prefer, I don't know, it's the Italian in me, to have a little bit of oil going on in the pan. And since the majority of this is pretty much oil-free other than what's getting me going, I'm not adding any excess fats, that little bit of oil does not bother me. This main dish, I'm not adding in any kind of carb. You could add in a rice if you wanted to. The pumpkin itself also is a bit of a starch. I have a half a teaspoon of smoked paprika and a half a teaspoon of fennel. I'm going in with spices that would be normally found in your pork sausage, but completely plant-based. And I'm gonna add in my carrot. I love the smell of that fennel. I'm just trying to soften that carrot a bit. I'm also throwing in some Italian seasoning. Again, not measuring, looking at that, that's probably right there, about a half a teaspoon. Always, I recommend dealing with your spices to taste. I never go by a recipe if it says something about spices. Usually I double them. I'm gonna add in my apples. Smells so good right now. I am just giving a minute or two for each one of those ingredients to get its game on, and I started out with the hardest, or the one vegetable that I want to break down the most. Mushrooms are last. They are gonna need some time to also break down, and I am due now at this point for another round of salting. Alright, I am going to throw in just a bit of stock to get me going, and I am using Orrington Farms. It's a powdered bouillon. Put in about 4 ounces of stock at the moment. I've got about a cup in now. Alright, I'm going to let this cook down till the mushrooms are pretty close to cooked. I need to add some red wine. It's a vegan certified red wine, whatever that means. About 1/4 cup. I think that's about 1/3. The red wine is used a lot to enhance beef. Since I am foregoing meat, I'm trying to pull out the flavors, things that attract you to those meats. I have some leeks. I threw in the dehydrator, and then I've been storing them in the freezer because, of course, I cut them uneven. There were a lot of leeks to process that day. Not all of it. I took to the dehydrator. Let's see what we got going on here. Almost there. I'm gonna add a bit more wine. By a bit, I mean about another 1/4 cup. Alright, I'm going to set this aside for that alcohol to cook off. And I am going to prep my cobbler. I only have a tablespoon of sugar going on. This is the golden Lecanto. I'm going to add another 2 more tablespoons. This is a no sugar sweetener. And then I also have my very secret ingredient, peach tree schnapps. Start with a tablespoon in there. This is my topping. I'm going to add in some Lecanto. We're going to add in a tablespoon of, and I also have a tablespoon of Miyoko's butter with 3/4 cup of plain rolled oats. And I'm going to add a tablespoon of this peach tree into this. So in here we have a tablespoon of the golden Lecanto, a tablespoon of the Miyoko's vegan butter, a tablespoon of peach tree with 3/4 cup of whole rolled oats. Cute little pie tins, pie dishes. They're ceramic. And I'm going to divide these apples into 2 here. I pulled the, what was I making? I pulled the stuffed mushrooms out. They're done. It took about 25 minutes for those because they were a bit larger. They did need a little bit longer, but the oven is still hot, so I want to get these in. I'm going to top this. This crumble. I now have an appetizer, dessert ready to get put in the oven. The main going on. Hopefully we'll be done soon. I think we are good here. I'm going to shut off the main. So the oven is still set at 350. I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to set it for about 20 minutes. Probably going to need a little bit longer than that, and we'll see how it goes. Time to fill her up. If you want to, you can bake these again. You could do this, cook the filling, not bake the pumpkin. Do them a day ahead of time if you're doing this for your Thanksgiving meal. Don't cook the pumpkin, hollow them out, stuff the pumpkin, and then bake it off the next day if you wanted to do prep earlier. I'm gonna go ahead and just fill up my pumpkins, and we're gonna move on to making that soup. I transferred my roasted veggies into this blender, and I'm going to be adding in some stock. You can use any kind of stock. I'm using that same brand, but the chicken version. I've got 2 cups in here. I'm going to start off with 1 cup. Of course, since I did not measure how much that butternut there was, I'm kind of just guessing at the amounts I'm adding here. I'm going to start with a cup. And then I'm also going to throw in that apple, the Granny Smith apple. And we're going to get this blended up. Not enough stock. If you came here looking for exact measurements, I'm sorry, that is not how I cook. I think some of y'all know that by now. I only do that when it comes to baking. Alright, this is now going to get transferred into my saucepan. I'm going to stir this constantly because if I don't, it's going to be bubbling all over the place. I am just doing this to get it good and heated. I have some unsweetened cashew milk. This is going to make it creamy. I'm going to turn it off the heat and then add the milk. Let's taste that. Oh, it's good. Do I even want to add this? Whoa, stop bubbling. I don't even think it needs this cashew cream. I think this is something that you can totally leave for servings. Add it in at the top, swirl it in, and I think that's exactly what I am going to do. Oh, this is like so good. I think I need anything more than a couple of those mushrooms, some of this soup, and I'll be good. Bit of the cream, sage for garnish, hold for picture. All right, soup's done. Whew, at this point in the game, I am feeling just a bit lazy on this salad, and it is a good thing that it is the last thing because it's the quicker thing. So I just harvested some kale, and I've washed it and shredded it a bit with my hands. I just tore it into smaller pieces. I am going to douse this in a bit of olive oil and massage it so that it can soften a bit while I prepare the dressing. Massage your kale, y'all. It's a thing. Pinch in a bit of salt. Ooh, massaging my kale. Yep, I'm getting loopy now. It's that time of day. We're gonna set this aside. Now I'm gonna make up some oil-less dressing since I just put oil in the kale. I have some fig vinegar. I love this stuff. About 2 tablespoons. And I have some apple cider. I get it everywhere. Adding about a tablespoon of apple cider. And some dill. And a pinch of salt. I have some craisins that are going to be going in. Thank you, Oogie Boogie Bash. Some of that butternut that I saved that was roasted. And earlier this week, I made a batch of candied pecan and walnuts. All right, y'all, I am going to be making up a batch of no sugar, vegan candied nuts that I'm going to be using later on in a salad, but I also want some for snacking. This is going to be a stovetop deal. I'm going to be adding in 6 tablespoons of vegan butter, 8 tablespoons of my Lakanto, and I'm using this Lakanto brown sugar mix. Just going to get this dissolved in here. Just trying to make sure I melt up that Lakanto before I go throwing in the nuts. And I'm going to be using 1 cup of walnuts and 1 cup of pecans. Pecan, I don't know. You decide. Tomato. Alrighty, in we go with my nuts. Get this good and coated. And I do want to keep an eye on these so that they don't burn. Alright, so I need to add in some cinnamon. And I got this recipe from Scattered Thoughts of a Crafty Mom. I literally just did a search for candied nuts that are sugar-free, and that's what I came up with. I am going to add some pumpkin spice because why not? Add a little bit of that fall flair. It does not say how much spices to put in. I'm just kind of guessing and sprinkling and testing by my nose. I can smell that cinnamon going. So it says to reduce the heat and let it simmer for about 5 minutes until the sauce thickens. This looks like it's a little saucy for me. So what I'm going to do is I am going to scoop out the nuts. Alright, I brought the pumpkin out. I want to break up these nuts a bit. I'd say I got about a 1/3 cup of nuts. Get away with doing less if you'd like. I don't think I need all of these. There's quite a bit of raisins in that package. very quick and easy autumn-inspired kale salad. All right, let's load this bad boy up. And the salad is done. All right, y'all, here it is, my autumn-inspired, plant-based 5-course meal. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please like, share, and subscribe if you have not done so already, and I hope to see you soon. Never trust a chef who doesn't eat their own food.